All right, back on the record, the case People versus Brandon Martin, RAF 150-6112. Martin is present with both counsel. The people are present. All members of the alternates are present. People's first witness.
Thank you. People called Leslie Harvey, Your Honor.
You do solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in the matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God? I do. Yes.
Remove your mask. Just the microphone for you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Spell your first and your last name.
Leslie Harvey, Leslie-Harvey.
Harvey, just a couple of rules about your testimony. First off, we need you to continue to use that microphone. You can adjust it if you like. You can move it towards you. The top of it will also move, or you can adjust your seat, but we do need you to speak directly in it, okay?
Okay.
Next rule is when the lawyers ask questions of you, we need you to give us a verbal or audible answer. So yes, no, or whatever you want to tell us, but if you just nod your head up and down or shake your head side to side, the court reporter can't record that, okay?
Okay.
Last rule is when the lawyers are asking questions and you're pretty confident you know what they're going to ask you and you want to jump in and answer, resist that, hesitate on that resistance. Because the lawyer's questions and your answers, if they're said at the same time, the court reporter won't be able to record it. So please wait until they're done with their question before you respond, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Ms. Harvey, you know the person by the name of Barry Swanson.
I do.
And who was that person to you?
My dad.
How close were you with Mr. Swanson?
Very close.
What type of man was he?
Amazing.
Explain that. How was he amazing to you?
I was his only girl, and the only girl of the entire family. So I was his princess. That's what he always called me. He was an amazing friend and father. Everyone who met him knew him, and he was a helpful person. He would do anything for anyone. I don't know that I have enough time to really explain how amazing he was. He was a best friend and an amazing dad.
You said that he was a best friend to you,
Mm-hmm.
and would you do all sorts of different activities together?
Weekly. He came to my house all the time.
What type of things did Barry like to do?
Anything with me and my brothers and our kids.
Did he have any hobbies?
He had a very strong passion for riding his Harley.
And what about you? Did you partake in that with him as well?
As much as I could, being a mom of little boys, yes.
All right, fair enough. I'm going to show you a photograph, People's 257. See that photograph?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And what is that? Tell us about this photo. Where was it taken?
We were north of Santa Barbara, where I lived. My dad took a ride with a big group of his good friends, and he picked me up along the way.
All right, and that's you to the right of Barry, is
yes.
that correct? Mm-hmm. And Barry's wearing his motorcycle leathers?
Yes.
All right.
It was cold.
I understand. When was this photo taken?
This was probably in 2010.
So about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry. There are some courtroom rules. And was it just you two as kind of a family outing?
It was just my dad and I with all of his friends.
Okay. And so would you ride with him?
Yes.
Would you ride with him often before you had kids?
Not as often as I would have liked, because I lived way up in Santa Barbara and he lived down in Orange County at the time.
Okay. And I understand that you're married, is that correct?
Yes.
And was Mr. Swanson, Barry, at your wedding?
Yes.
I'll show you some photos. People's 256. Is that the day of your wedding?
Yes.
When were you married?
11/11/11.
11, your lucky number. And so that's Mr. Swanson, your dad, there on the left side of that photo.
Yes.
Did he walk you down the aisle?
Yes.
Showing you People's 255. Again, another photo. You're on the left, he's on the right. And was he a big part of your day?
Yes.
Your wedding day?
Yes.
Showing you People's 254. Is that the father-daughter dance?
Yes.
And again, that's another photo of you and your father.
Yes.
And then lastly, I'm going to show you People's 258. And about 9 years ago, almost in a couple days, it'll be 9 years to the day, right?
Yes.
And that's, again, your father and yourself dancing.
Yes.
At your wedding.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm going to ask you some difficult questions now. I apologize. When was the last time that you talked to Barry?
September 17th, 2015.
So the day of the murders.
Yes.
What time did you talk to him?
9:10 in the morning.
And 9:10?
Mm-hmm.
And you,
Yes. Yes.
And you know the exact time?
Yeah. I looked.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I looked at my text messages.
Okay, so you talked through it via text?
At first, yes, and then he called me right back.
Okay. And what was the discussion about?
Was just saying good morning, and we were going to plan to take our kids to have ice cream with him that night.
To have ice cream?
Yes.
And what time were you planning on going to get ice cream?
As soon as he finished his job.
Did he tell you where his job was?
In Corona.
Where did he live at the time?
He lived in Riverside.
And do you know what time he was supposed to be done and to go pick the kids up and get ice cream?
Typically, a job with what he had to do at that house would take several hours, so he was thinking in the later afternoon he would be ready to go.
And at some point, were you texting him or trying to call him to find out where he was or whether he was going to come?
Not until I was informed that he was missing and possibly been assaulted.
Okay. And who was it that called you and gave you that notification?
My dad's manager. I was good friends with his wife, so she called to tell me that they couldn't find him and if I had seen him.
What time was that?
It was about 8 o'clock that evening.
So did the police ever contact you that night?
No, we were asked to please contact an officer, and my husband did that for me.
And that's Michael Harvey?
Yes.
At some point, did you go to the Corona police station?
Yes.
What time did you do that?
I think it was probably 9:30 by the time we got there.
And while you were at the Corona Police Station, did you know what had happened?
No.
How was it that you found out?
I was told that my dad's truck was stolen and that he was possibly assaulted, and that's the only information that I had. They wouldn't give me any other information.
Okay. So you haven't received the death notice yet?
No.
How did you find out about your father's passing?
A woman by the name of Melody Martin entered the police station with one of her sons and I believe a nephew. And she's the one who said, "I'm so sorry, your dad's dead." And I didn't know at that point, so that's how I found out.
How did you respond to that?
I tried to leave the police station to try and wrap my head around what was going on. I found a room and I cried and screamed.
And you never had met Melody Martin before?
No. Mm-mm.
Did you ask her why she was telling you this, or what?
I did.
Okay.
I actually said, "Please stop talking to me because I don't know what's going on."
When was your dad's funeral?
It was September 22nd.
And were there a lot of people there?
At least 200.
Was he? Where did he live at the time?
My dad lived in Riverside.
Riverside City.
Yes.
And did he have a lot of friends in the area?
Yes, he had friends from all over, actually.
How has your father's life impacted you?
Greatly. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. My dad was a provider. We traveled to the river every summer growing up, to the mountains in the wintertime. He taught me how to ski. He taught me how to water ski.
It sounds like he was greatly involved in your life.
Yes.
Was he the type of father that you would talk to every day?
Yes.
And you said that you would see him even about once a week?
At least, yes.
And even when you lived in Santa Barbara, or was it less then?
I came out on the weekends as often as I can, and I saw him quite a bit.
And now, the impact of his death, how has that affected you?
Greatly. I don't have my person anymore. My dad was the glue that held our family together. This has torn apart the relationships with my brothers and myself, with all of our family. There's no way to heal and move on from something like this. And my dad was the one that kept us together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ross? Thank you.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Back in 2015, when this case was first filed, were you going to court,
Yes.
basically seeing what's going on?
Yes.
Did you have any contact, again, with Melody, it turned out, is Melody Martin, Brandon's mom, correct?
Correct.
Did you have any other contact with her when you were coming to court?
No.
Specifically, did she ever offer you a card or anything like that?
She gave it to her nephew to give to us,
Okay.
and I threw it in the trash.
All right. So you saw her hand something to her nephew, Michael?
I never saw her hand it to Mike. He just said, "This is from my aunt."
Okay. So he handed it to you,
Yes.
and you did not open it?
No.
You just threw it in the trash?
Yes.
How come?
I didn't want to hear what she had to say
How come?
because she devastated my life.
What did she do?
I feel like my dad should have known what he was walking into. He had no idea what he was walking into.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ethan?
Nothing. Thank you.
Witness excused?
Yes.
Yes. You're excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, people called Michael Harvey.
They solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in the matter shall be the truth.
I do.
State and spell your first and your last name for the record.
Michael Harvey, Michael Harvey.
Mr. Harvey, I know you testified earlier in the trial. So the same rules would apply. Make sure you use the microphone. Wait until the lawyers are done asking their questions before you answer. Make sure you give us verbal responses, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Harvey.
Good morning.
I understand you married a princess.
I did.
Was that the name that Barry used to use for Lisa or Leslie?
Yes.
Okay. How was it that you entered into the Swanson family on 11/11/11?
Well, she made that date, so I wouldn't forget it. But I had moved to Santa Barbara to be a recruiter for the Army. That's where I was getting stationed, and that's where we met.
Okay. Were you in the military?
Yes.
How long were you in the military for?
Just under 9 years.
Where did you serve?
I was initially stationed in Fort Polk, Louisiana, in the infantry, and then my last 3 years I was a recruiter in Santa Barbara.
Okay. A great place to recruit.
Yeah.
So how did you meet Leslie?
We actually met online.
Different times.
Different times.
Okay. And then you began a relationship with her, and did you meet Barry Swanson during that relationship?
Yes.
Do you remember when the first time you saw Barry?
I think it was the first Thanksgiving that we spent together.
Do you remember what year that would be?
2009.
And was that down here in Riverside area or up there in Santa Barbara?
No, that would have been down here.
Okay. So you and Leslie traveled down from Santa Barbara for Thanksgiving. Was it at Barry's house or?
No, our holidays were usually spent at her grandmother's house.
Okay. And that was the first interaction you had with Barry Swanson?
Yes, I believe so.
Did you guys hit it off?
Not initially. I mean, coming into a family and taking the only girl, I think, is a hard place for anybody.
Right. I mean, she was the princess.
Right.
So over time, did you begin a relationship of respect and trust with Barry?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were married, how was that for Barry in terms of giving away his princess?
I'm sure it was sad and happy. He was very happy that she was getting married.
Now, when you guys married, did you stay in Santa Barbara or did you move down here?
We stayed in Santa Barbara until I got out of the Army, and then we moved to Riverside.
Okay. So when did you get out of the Army?
12/12/12.
Okay, keep these dates easy, right? Now, we heard from Leslie that Barry used to like to ride Harleys.
Yes.
And she did as well?
Yes.
Did you ride Harleys or involved in that hobby at all?
No, I did not.
Okay. So you didn't go up to the Cold Stone Tavern up there on Highway 154?
No, we were dating at that time.
Okay. So when you moved down to Riverside, did you see more of Barry?
Yes.
Okay. Describe how it was when you were down here and your interaction with Barry.
When we moved to Riverside, he's actually the one that helped me get a job with Defender, because I worked for Defender as well for about 3 years.
Okay. So the recruiter got recruited.
Exactly.
Right. And you started working for Defenders. And while we're talking about it, let me show you what's been marked as 249. you recognize that photograph?
Yes,
And who's that?
that's Barry Swanson.
Okay. And is that Barry's Raptor truck?
Yes.
Now, so when you started working for Defenders, it was Barry that got you the job?
That's correct.
And did you guys work on projects together or jobs together?
Towards the end of my employment there, yes, we would work at least 2 to 3 times a week together. I would stop by at his jobs or he would stop by at mine.
So it's fair to say that you had a great deal of interaction with him at the time?
Yes.
Okay. And I know you testified in the guilt phase of the trial that you left Defenders for about a week before Mr. Swanson was murdered?
That's correct.
Okay. Was that because you were moving on to a different firm, or what were the circumstances?
Yes, I got a different job.
Okay. But once you got a different job, you were still in close contact with Mr. Barry Swanson?
Yes.
Okay. That day, September the 17th, 2015, how did you hear about Barry's death?
My wife received a call that he was missing or that they couldn't get a hold of him. I reached out to his manager, who I had became friends with also, and he gave me the contact number to a detective, and I reached out to the detective.
And then you got some information, but not the full picture at that time?
Correct. The detective wouldn't really give up much. It was just more so you guys needed to come down to the station.
And you and Leslie went to the Corona Police Department? Correct. Was it just you and Leslie, or were any other family members?
When we initially walked in, it was just her and I.
And from what Leslie's saying, you're not getting much information. You're kind of like in like a fog.
Correct.
Okay. While you were at the station, did anybody tell you or Leslie how or what was going on with regard to Barry?
The other family walked into the lobby, and initially we didn't know who they were, but then there was a lady that said that she apologized for Barry. But then at that point, Leslie just told her, get away from me. And she tried to leave, but we went into another room, and that's where she collapsed and started crying.
Okay. And so you heard that Barry had been killed, not from the police, but from this other woman that you now know to be Melody Martin?
Correct.
Okay. And you saw the impact that had on Leslie?
Correct.
Okay. She's your wife?
Correct.
And she was devastated by it?
Correct.
Okay. And you yourself, you become close to Barry, you had a working relationship, and you were the son-in-law.
Correct.
And how did that impact you when you heard that?
In that moment, I felt helpless. Being a husband and a protector, there was nothing that I could do to take that pain away from her.
Right. And over the years, since that terrible day, September 17th, 2015, till now, have you seen that impact on Leslie that whole time?
Yes.
Okay. How has she dealt with the loss of her father?
I think it's a struggle every day. Seeing pictures or having memories or anything like that brings up the past and the hurt.
And of course, you and Leslie have children together.
Correct.
How old are your children?
Say that again.
How old are your children?
My oldest two are 7 and 8, and then we have a 4-year-old.
Okay. So at the time of Barry's murder, you would have had 2 small children, like 1 or 2 years of age?
Correct.
Did they really get a chance to see Granddad?
We were around Barry quite often, so they had a very good relationship with Barry.
Okay. And in terms of from an outsider, did you look at how this impacted the rest of the Swanson family, the children, Jeremy and Josh?
Yes.
And what have you seen over the years since the murder, how it's impacted them?
I feel like Barry was the glue for the family. Brothers and sisters fight and bicker and argue. It's just a way of life, but he was the one that brought them together.
And you said earlier that Thanksgiving would normally be at Grandma's house.
Mm-hmm.
Is Thanksgiving still at Grandma's house?
Yes.
Is there a chair there for Barry?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. But at those family get-togethers, what is it like having a family get-together without the glue of Mr. Barry Swanson being there?
It's hard. There's a piece of the family that's no longer there.
Okay. Now, in terms of how Mr. Barry Swanson died, are you familiar with some of the facts of this case in terms of the brutality of his murder?
Yes.
And the way he was, that he had many defensive wounds.
Mm-hmm.
We know that from Leslie that Barry was a Vietnam veteran.
Yes.
Did that have a connection with you, both being military?
Yes, I believe so. I think there was a mutual respect there.
And in terms of, Leslie was saying that Barry was very much a provider and a protector of his family.
Yes.
In much the same way that you said that that's what you want to do.
Yes.
Okay. When you hear about what happened to him, how does the injuries that he suffered, the defensive injuries and the injuries to the head of the baseball bat, how has that knowledge impacted you in terms of how you remember Barry?
It's typical of Barry that he wouldn't go down without a fight.
And he would want to help?
Would want to protect and help who was in the home. That's the whole point of installing security systems to begin with, is you're there to protect families.
And did he took that job seriously?
Yes.
And he believed it was an important thing he was doing?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of his funeral, you attended the funeral?
Yes.
And I believe that was on 9/22 of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. And Leslie said there was a big turnout?
Yes.
And family there, friends were there?
Yes.
Okay. Some 200 people?
It was probably more than 200. There was at least 150 motorcycles, if not more, and then people with cars and things like that.
And the motorcycles were friends of his that used to ride Harleys together? Now, Okay. In fact, we remember his Raptor would have a Harley Davidson sticker on a decal on the back of the
Yes.
Now, in terms of Barry Swanson, how would you like us to remember him?
He was a fun-loving guy, and he loved his family. He did great at his job, but at the end of the day, all he cared about was his family and spending time with his grandkids and his 3 kids.
Great. Thank you, Ron.
No questions.
Please excuse.
Yes.
You're excused. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
This people called Jeremy Swanson. What was he?
Please solemnly state that the evidence is in the matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Jeremy Swanson, Jeremy Swanson.
Mr. Swanson, if you could continue to use that microphone, please speak directly in it. When the lawyers ask questions of you, we need an audible or verbal answer. So if you just nod your head up and down or shake your head side to side without a response out loud, court reporter can't record that. So please give us a verbal answer. Also, please wait until the lawyers are done asking their questions before you respond. In other words, don't talk over top or at the same time as them, okay?
Understood.
All right.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Swanson.
Good morning.
I have a few questions I want to ask you about your relationship with Barry Swanson. Who is Barry Swanson to you?
He was my father. He was very, very, very important to me.
Okay. Let me show you a photograph. 249 for identification. Is that Barry there?
That is.
And when you say he was very, very important to you, what was it about Barry that was so important to you as his son?
No, we were inseparable. You know, he wasn't just a dad to me. He was, you know, a mentor, somebody that I talked to constantly. He lived with my wife and I and my kids. We had a property where he lived in the back house, and, you know, we spent a lot of time together, vacations. Him and I were just extremely close.
And you said he wasn't just a dad.
Yeah.
He was all these other things to you as well. And in terms of, were you kind of like simpatico in terms of what you knew him and he knew you intuitively without even having to talk about things?
Yeah, it was typically if I knew I had something I needed to talk about that was important, he was the person that I would talk to about it. If it wasn't my wife, it was my dad. I talked to him every day.
Where did you guys grow up?
We grew up in Riverside.
Okay. So you still live in the Riverside area?
Yeah, we still live in the same home.
Okay. And you've lived, you and your family, you have two siblings?
Yes.
Yeah. Leslie, who we just saw, and then you have, is it an older brother, Josh?
Yes, Josh is on the middle.
And so there's the three children. And you grew up in Riverside that whole time. Now, your dad, what work did he do when you were growing up?
Initially growing up, he was in communications in the computer world. He was in telecommunications. He was a boss. He was a site supervisor and ran projects in the computer industry. And then later on, he switched over into window coverings when I was around, I think, 17, 18. And he had started his own business before getting into the alarms.
Right. And when you say window coverings, we're talking about like blinds and shutters and things like that?
Yeah, blinds and shutters and all that.
And he started his own business?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you know if anybody followed in that line of work?
I did. I built my whole career around it, and I still do it today.
Okay. So you're in the same line of business that your dad was in window shutting? Yeah,
he taught me how to do it when I was 18, and then I think around 2003 I would have been 23, and that was when I started my own. And with his blessing, he said, he was in Orange County doing it, so I said, can I do it in Riverside? And he goes, yeah, just don't come into my territory. And right. I started my own thing, and now 17 years later, I'm still doing it.
You had a non-compete clause?
Absolutely. It was more of a respect clause, but yeah, absolutely. Apologize.
So he's doing the work in the Orange County area, and you're building your business here in Riverside, and 17 years later, you still have that?
Yes, I've been doing it successfully for 17 years and was able to support my family and ended up buying us a home for my dad to basically retire in.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, at the time, how old was your dad when he was murdered on September the 17th, 2015?
He was 62.
Okay. Was he looking to retire?
Yes, he only had just a few weeks left and was going to be just living with my family and I and enjoying his retirement and taking care of the grandkids.
Okay. And you said a few moments ago that you had a house and then you had, I believe it's what's known as a casitas.
Yes, sir.
In the back.
Yeah, so we have, my family and I have the main house, and then we're on an acre, and there was the back house that my dad had his own 2-car garage, his own living room, laundry room, bathroom, and he was able to be, we called him the neighbor, but he was in our backyard, which my kids absolutely adored, and we had planned that for 2 years, and unfortunately we only got to live there for 8 weeks with him. We moved in September, and we moved in July, and then this happened 8 weeks later.
So you bought the house in July of 2015?
Yes.
And part of the reason for buying that property was to have your dad in the back house?
That was the main reason. That was why I sold my home, to be able to buy something that he could, to retire in, and his, being able to not have to afford expensive rent. I said, all you have to do is pay my property taxes, which was $800 a month. So he was happy to do so, and I was proud to be able to provide a home for him.
Okay. And in fact, had he even unpacked all the boxes by the time of his murder?
No.
And you said that this place is going to be you, your wife, and your children. How old were your children at the time?
They were 2 and 5 when this happened. They're 10 and 7 now.
Okay. Do they have a memory of Grandpa?
They talk about him every day.
Okay. And in terms of how did you actually hear that your dad had been killed?
Sorry, this part's hard. Unfortunately, with my business, I don't travel much, and for the first time in many years, I happened to be in China on a business trip touring a factory, and I was on a bus coming over from Hong Kong when I was told I needed to call home. And my wife was on the phone, and she said that we think your dad's been killed. And we didn't know exactly what had happened. We'd heard that his truck had been stolen, so I was like, oh, Dad, his truck was his baby, and it's a very nice truck, so I thought somebody had carjacked him possibly. We didn't know details. I was in China, as far away from my family as I possibly could be. So I talked to detectives, and then we eventually were able to confirm what had happened. But initially, I was on a bus coming over into Hong Kong when I got the call.
So you were essentially alone with...
Yes. I had no family. I had nobody there. It was just business associates, and at that moment, never realized how far away I was from home until I couldn't go home. I had to catch a 17-hour flight. I was on a plane within 2 hours from finding out.
Okay. And then you had to come back to what you came back to?
Yeah, I flew back. I think he had just been caught in the truck by the time I got home, so I got home rather quick. I was home within 20. Brandon, who was in my father's truck, he had been caught, and so we knew that. I was also very afraid because he had stolen my father's truck. If he would have hit the GPS in my father's truck, it would have taken him straight to my home where my family was at that moment. So I was the one from China who pointed out that my family needed to be evacuated from my home because he had the keys to my home, the address, he had everything. So it was immediately, I was gone from being so terrified and scared and sad that my father was killed, where I had to think about my family being hurt by someone who had just killed my father.
And I know Mike Harvey just mentioned a moment ago that one of the things about Barry is that he wanted to be a protector.
Yeah.
And do you follow that? Is that part of your makeup as well?
You know, on my very first, with the media being involved, I was interviewed the night that I got home by ABC, and exactly what happened is exactly what I said happened at that moment. I said that I knew my father, if someone was being hurt or something was going on, he wouldn't run from it. He would run towards it and help everybody there, and that's exactly what he did. He knew that he saw Brandon beating his own uncle and ran towards him, and I knew that years ago, and it's been confirmed.
Because...
Sorry. It's a lot to get out.
I'll pause after the answer.
I'll talk slow.
Let me show some photographs because in some ways your dad was the glue to the family.
Yes.
And do you see yourself somewhat in the same role as taking over from Barry?
You know, I've been told that you need to be the captain now and take over, but unfortunately with how this happened and what happened to my father, it crushed me. It's made me very, depressed, anxiety and whatnot. So yes, I would say that my father would say that I would be the person that would step into that role, but the emotions of this have absolutely affected me in ways that sometimes I have to shut down just to gain control of my emotions rather than being there for everybody else. So yes, I would say that I absolutely could be the glue, but sometimes my glue is watered down by the pain and everything I've gone through with this.
Has Barry's death impacted your ability to emotionally or psychologically cope with problems?
Absolutely. This has completely changed my mindset, and I've talked to therapists about this, and they've explained it, and it does something to. It's almost like a form of PTSD, I would say, where in every conversation when I'm trying to be normal, I'm not.
And when you've spoken to this therapist, this is beyond grief.
Yeah. It's far traumatic stuff like this is not just like losing someone to cancer. My father was beaten to death, and I've had to now see pictures of his head beaten in and know how my father died, every detail, because someone took the choice to take his life, and it's something that no one should have to go through.
And before that, obviously you were running a successful business. You were doing business trips to China, to look at factories, to resource the materials, and you were operating in an effective manner.
Yeah, I've always operated the business to the best of my abilities and was able to build it into a successful company. And luckily, at the time of my father's death, I had the staff that could back me up and take on the role as running the company as best they could. But I would say for 3 years, it ran a lot different without my mind being glued into it the way it was. But the company still today runs. It's just we've not done as well as we did in 2015.
Okay. Let me show you some photographs, and this may be difficult, Jeremy, but I want to show you some photographs of your family.
Yes, sir.
As they were back before Barry was killed. I'm going to show you 253. You see that photograph there?
Yes, that was my wife's 30th surprise birthday party I threw for her.
Okay. And if we go from right to left, if you're looking at the photograph, who's the young chap on the right-hand side?
That's a little more chubby me, kind of next to my dad, and that's my beautiful wife, my mom.
Okay, let me go through. If you look at the photograph, on the left-hand side, that's your dad, Barry. Mm-hmm. Is that a yes?
Yes, sir.
And then next to Barry is a slimmer version of Jeremy.
That is me.
Don't worry, it happens to us all. And then in the middle, with your arm around, that's your wife.
It's my wife, Kristen.
Kristen, okay. And who's next to Kristen?
That would be my mom, Donna.
Okay. Now, your mom and dad were divorced?
Yeah, they had separated probably almost 16, 17 years before this all happened.
Okay. But obviously, she's at this birthday party, so things were...
They were still best friends. They still talked almost every day.
Okay. And then next to Donna is...
My sister, Leslie.
Okay. And then at the end of the line...
It's my brother, Josh.
Okay. Now, I mean, you spoke some about how this has impacted you and the emotional and psychological issues. How has your relationship with the siblings been impacted, if it has been impacted?
It's been destroyed. I haven't talked to my brother in almost 2 years. My sister and I have fallen apart. It's really, my dad was that neutral zone for all of us, and we all have different personalities, and going through this has been very, very detrimental to the relationships in my family.
Is that because of what you're going through, or are Josh and Leslie going through emotional problems as well?
I think it's individually our own problems, and I also have an issue where I just shut down sometimes rather than where I would be better at talking about things. This here has caused me to shut down in ways that I can't get through everything else I have going on, so we just had some disagreements in times, and it's really been a struggle to have communication when you don't have the neutral zone that was always there your whole life.
Let me show you 251. You see that photograph there, Jeremy?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Is that your dad and you on the right and Josh on the left?
Yes.
And was this what you were talking about, that even though there may have been disagreements among the siblings, your dad would be the one to get you together and be that glue?
This dinner was that. This was just around the corner at Heroes, probably just a few months before everything happened, where we would, I don't remember the exact reason for whatnot, but the boys needed a night out, and Dad was one that would say, "Let's go, boys," and he took us out to dinner that night.
Let me show you another photograph as well. This is 252. You see that photograph there?
I do.
Okay. And we're looking at Barry being on the left-hand side of the photograph.
Yes.
And then who's that behind Barry?
That's my mother, Donna.
Okay. And then behind Donna, is that Leslie?
Yes, my sister.
Okay. And then over to the right-hand side, the person at the back of the photograph?
That would be one of a good friend of my brother and sisters and all of us, a guy named Taylor that was just there for my wife's birthday.
Okay. And is that Josh then, is the last one?
Yes, that's my brother.
I think we heard from Leslie that your dad liked to ride Harleys.
That was one of our closest bonds, I think him and I shared.
Okay. You became a Harley rider as well?
Yes, I still, to this day, own his first, well, it was my first Harley, but it was his soft toe that he had bought and then kind of got him back into it. And I proudly still own it today. And I think we have over 55,000 miles on each of our bikes. We probably rode most of that together.
When did you start riding bikes together?
I think he let me ride that bike for the first time when I was 21. So I'm 39 now, so I've got almost 20 years in riding, and most of it was logged with him.
And would you go on rides with him?
Yeah, oh yeah, we would do, we would plan long trips, like go to Sturgis together, so we would take 3 weeks off, and the last time I got to go with him, I think, was around 2008, 2009, right before I had my first kid. Okay. And the three of us, just the two of us, went on a 3-week vacation to Sturgis, just him and I, from Yellowstone to everywhere, and just spent a lot of good times together. He would do that a lot, where it was just him and I would take off on a 2 or 3 day trip. We would just ride up to Yosemite real quick and go on a loop, but it was just our way to get away, and it was our bond.
And then, of course, Sturgis is the annual event in North Dakota.
That is the biggest motorcycle event definitely in the country, if not in the world.
Did Barry have a big group of friends here in Riverside that he'd ride bikes with? Very
large group of friends. It was nothing affiliated by any means, just all business bikers is what we like to call them, the weekend warriors. So they would go to work during the week, but then to get away and to have that camaraderie, they all love their Harleys, and his friends still all ride, and they're all talking to us today. They're still very close to us.
And yeah, so...
I'm sorry.
And those friends, you're still in contact with them today?
Yes, I talked to most of them.
And what kind of impact has Barry's death had on those?
Just how my father was kind of like the monarch in our family and the glue for us. He was also that for his community. He planned a lot of their events and their group rides. The Super Bowl ride was probably their most popular one that my dad did, I think, for 14 years. Every year on Super Bowl, there would be hundreds of bikes would show up to come with my dad on his ride that he would plan out for months. So he was definitely the head of planning the adventures for them.
Was that Super Bowl ride? Is that the one that gets together at the Harley-Davidson dealership on Indiana here in Riverside?
That wouldn't be that one. My dad's was his own. He kind of set up different routes every year. But he was affiliated with Skip Fordyce, and those guys over there. He knew everybody there. They all knew him.
Let me show you 260 for identification. And you see that photograph there?
I do.
Okay. Is that your dad, and is that Josh?
Yes, that's my brother.
Okay. And do you know where this photograph was taken?
I want to say that might be Liam's in Elsinore, but I can't remember. Honestly, my brother would probably know exact. I was there. That's even my shirt my brother borrowed from me for some reason. I recognize that shirt.
But would that be a time when you'd be riding bikes?
Oh yes, yes.
And the headgear there would be something to put on, so any bald spots might be protected from the helmet?
Yeah, my dad, he had lost his hair, not like my brother and I luckily have kept ours, but my dad, he wore the bandanas also. It was, it makes your helmet that much more comfortable, so he always had that when he rode. Most of us did.
Let me show you 259. You see that photograph there?
I do.
Does that appear to be from the same bar?
It could be, but from a different day.
Okay. Who's in that photograph then?
That would be my brother and my dad.
Okay. Now, in terms of your dad, I think a couple of people have mentioned before that he was a Vietnam veteran.
Yes, very proud.
Okay. Let me show you a picture of 263. You see that photograph there?
I do.
Who's that?
That's my father. He was maybe 19 years old.
Okay. And did he tell you about some of the experiences he had in Vietnam?
Yes, he was originally had gone to work in the motor pool, but he tested too high that they said, you can't work on cars, you're going to work on helicopters. And then when he arrived in Vietnam, they didn't have any jobs open, so he ended up he took a door gunner's position, which at the time he didn't think about the kill rate on that job. And he ended up he lived through 5 helicopter crashes while he was there. He had saved 3 of his crews by being able to protect them. And there's a lot of stories that he told me that were of his time there, and he proudly served our country.
And he told you stories about life and death, and how he, during those tours of Vietnam, avoided death the whole time.
Yes, and he, living through those, I think it was 4 or 5 crashes he had to live through, and I believe a pilot died every time. He lost a lot of his close friends there, so being shot down usually meant somebody was shot or your pilot was injured or the helicopter was disabled, and somehow, he told me a story one time how the only way he survived was to jump out of the helicopter 20 feet before he hit the ground, so he rolled down a hill and was able to survive.
And you said he was a gunner?
Yes, he was a door gunner, and then he was a crew chief. A door gunner?
And when we say door gunner, that's a person who sits on the open door of a helicopter and would shoot at the enemy down below? Or
yes,
fire
he was basically hanging out of the side of the helicopter with I don't remember what caliber he was shooting, but it was very big.
Okay. Do we stop now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and take our news recess at this time. Remind all of you not to step back, on themselves with anyone under the